Dr. Kwok, I'm going to ask if you could lead us in your closing reflection. Bishop Tolton, you next, and then I will get to go and wrap us up. We're going to go on and let this extend a little longer because we started a little late and had a couple of other delays, and definitely I am excited about just hearing your reflections of the day and these amazing speakers as well. Thank you. Dr. Kwok.
Thank you very much, Bishop Rawls. I am just so impressed by all the presentations, and I am delighted to have this opportunity to co-host this event because it underscores the importance that we cannot understand the gospel or Christianity fully from our own neck of the wood. Our horizons must be challenged by others who speak other tongues, who perform gender identity and expression differently, who find masculinity and femininity, those binary concepts, limiting. We need to listen to those who try to inhabit the multiplicity within themselves and within their culture. For a long time, I worked in postcolonial theology. This theology wants to disengage us from the colonial syndrome. So I want to share with you very briefly what I have been stretched this morning, today, for doing postcolonial theology, maybe in a slightly different way. That word, domestication, kept coming back and again as I was listening. Why domestication? We domesticate people like what we have learned to domesticate animals. And now we even want to domesticate the Mars. Can you believe it? We want to send human beings to go to ruin Mars. We have not finished ruining Earth, the planet. Domestication means the animal or people needs to fit in a certain mode. For what? For profit, for productivity, for our own interest. We do not care about their livelihood. I am beginning to understand. We domesticated the chicken, the cows in this agricultural business. How we have domesticated ourselves, forcing everyone to toe the line. The normative bodies, the beauty of it. And many of us internalized that body normative magic. We have absolutely to lament, to have a sense of what we as human beings have done to ourselves. We do not let ourselves live. Think about the Haitian police at the border. Think about those victims of our drone attacks. Think about the people in Afghanistan and in many different parts of the world. Think about July 2021 as the hottest month human beings have ever recorded. If we do not have a collective awareness that this is not working, I think we may have missed our last chance. In this global reorientation of finding something new, today, as a theologian, as a person of faith, as a Christian, I ask, what cultural values that our tradition can offer to not only humankind, but for the flourishing of all the species? This is a daunting task for anyone alone. to be able to imagine the complexity, the difficulties, and the challenges ahead. That is why we need each other. We need the emergent voices that can challenge those of us who have been around for some time, because they offer new language, new metaphors, new possibilities of living into the unknown, an uncharted territory, a house that has so many different colors, the bodies that can perform intimately in ways that we have yet to imagine. I like to conclude by evoking that powerful image of the jeepneys. I have been to the Philippines, have ridden on one of those. I want to use what Kay has just said. We might have inherited a weaponized Christianity, a Christianity that should be life-giving, but weaponized for domestication. Domesticate human beings and all the species. First, she said, you have to remove the weapon. We have to have the courage to rise up to say that is not the true gospel. And then the second thing is you have to expand the seeds. I like that. And that is why we cannot just rely on the weaponized Christianity for our survival. We have to look into African Christianity, Asian Christianity, Latin American Christianity, Indigenous Christianity, Middle Eastern Christianity, LGBTIQ Christianities that have been there. But because of the weaponized Christianity, we never got to study, to reconnect with the power and the energy. We lost touch with something that can be tremendous giving. And then to make the weapon vehicle into a means of transportation. We do not do this for our self-aggrandization as human beings. We do it as channels of grace and peace because we believe in a living God. Why the creation stories were told in Genesis? It was during the time when the people of Israel experienced horrific incidents of their histories. The myth of Genesis reclaim and proclaim God is the God who creates the universe, separating light from dead. Earth can arise. Then first, you have vegetation, you have animals. They provide a habitat for us to be able to live and flourish. We today need to proclaim God is greater than the weaponized Christianity. We have to reconnect with God so that we will value all bodies, all expression of gender identities, so that the yoke of slavery, that is the bodies being enslaved, can be liberated, and we channel that knowledge, that courage, and the understanding as means of transportation, of helping others and other species for the splendor of God, the Creator, who sees everything as good. Amen.
Amen.
Bishop Tolton, that was amazing,
Ah,
Dr. Kwok. Thank you.
amen. God bless you.
You all, let me just say, you all can always see why every Liberating Theologies, we want to just spend the whole time with each one person, right? But the goal here is to Dr. Kwok's point, to open us up to new possibilities, understanding that it is impossible to have enough time to give each one of these reflections sufficient space, but I'm just so grateful we got to connect. Bishop Tolton.
Thank you so much. The crime of the church throughout time has been its unfortunate relationship with the nation state and the ways in which it has collaborated with the nation state to colonize not only so many countries, but more importantly, it has colonized our minds and it has colonized our bodies. And this has happened through creating systems of control. These systems of control have domesticated us. And as Professor said, suffocated us. We have not been able to live because our spirits have really been cut off. And our unbridled sense of selves have never been given the oxygen to breathe and to emerge and to flourish and to be the incredibly beautiful spirits that they are. What each of your presentations did for me today was to really offer your personal witness up as an epistle that each of you wrote. And there is a redemptive narrative in each of your epistles in which you are commanding that we take back our lives, our spirits, our bodies, our cultures, and our nations, that we take them back. And I deeply believe that it is in the taking them back and it is in the owning of our own stories and our new narratives that we find ourselves in this Kairos moment. In this Kairos moment, it is an opportunity for border crossing. It is an opportunity for the footprint of God to emerge in new spaces. It is an opportunity for us to set free a queer Christ in a world that is dry and seeking answers and solutions to its great ills. We hold in our hands that water that the world needs to drink from. We are the architects of a well that I believe will produce fresh water that can quench the thirst of all of us. The question becomes for us, how is it that we are going to operationalize our movement? If we look at the book of Acts, Acts 2 is explosive and dynamic. And on the day of Pentecost, they all spoke in tongues, and every language was worthy of being heard. There wasn't the romantic languages that they all spoke and the languages from Africa were not, but every language was on an equal playing field and understood to be worthy as a language that the Holy Spirit gave as a gift to all of those that were assembled. And they had joy. And then Acts talks about how they came together economically and sold all their goods, brought them to the church and divided them as each household had need. But when you move beyond those stories in Acts and get into the later portions of Acts, chapter after chapter after chapter deals with this fundamental question. Once we've received the Spirit, once we understand the messaging, once we've internalized the majesty and the magic of our call and the possibility of our proclamations, we then must put pen to paper regarding how will we operationalize this movement. How will we distribute it and produce it and present it to the world? There is the wonderful question of the move of the Spirit, but then there's also the fundamental question of the business of the church and the business of our organizing and operationalizing the brilliance of all that has been said today so that it becomes the primary message from the Christian church. That takes, and sorry for the use of this language, some business sensibilities to operationalize our brilliance. And I challenge us today to think about how we operationalize the beauty of the liberating thoughts and ideas that have been so brilliantly presented today.
Well, so my goodness. Um, there is a word that has outside of this notion of I'm still very much sitting in this this feminization of our conversations and the unapologetic ways we had that conversation, right? Like there was no, I didn't feel any pushback from any of our presenters from being okay navigating in those ways that is not common, to be quite honest, in the academy um, or even in the public square. When we think about those kind of two places that these narratives at times come forth. And so I'm chewing on that still. There's some there, as I like to say at times, and I'm not finished with that yet. And so I really want to thank you all for the liberative nature of each one of your sharings. But the word that keeps coming forth for me, and I had an opportunity to share words on Saturday at the homegoing celebration for Archbishop Carl Bean, who is the founder of the Unity Fellowship Church movement here in the United States, a denomination that was birthed out of the pain and struggles of HIV and AIDS hitting the Black community in particular, and a denomination being birthed from that, and I'm part of the fruit of that work. But the word that kept coming up was this word, condolences. And the amount of times I've had to say it over the past 18 months in particular. Condolences, condolences, condolences. When I think about those horrific images at the Texas border, even before seeing the atrocities happening with the Haitians, thinking about that with Mexicans, and thinking about each one of these man-made borders, right? Whether geographic borders, ideological borders that we definitely experienced here in the United States when there was the coup attempt, is the only way I can explain it, in January 2021, when there was not a peaceful transfer of power. But this notion of grief and condolence, right, that comes. And I ran to the origin of that word, and it's actually Latin. And what the word actually translates into, or its root is this word condore, or sitting in suffering with. And when I got to that definition, so much of that kept coming back to me as each one of you were presenting, because what sitting in suffering looks like and demands, in my mind, is the essence of the gospel message. Bishop Tolton, to your point about thinking of Acts, right? Or when thinking about Jesus, right? The thing that people struggled with so much with Jesus was he rejected all of the boundaries and let love be the lens. And in that process of being moved by the human condition, which is what had him with women, what had him with lepers, what had him with the, everybody that was othered, he wound up with them. How did that happen? It happened because of that part of him that saw the human condition, the earthly conditions, and was moved by them. I wonder if we are at a place where we can be courageous enough to allow human condition, regardless of the body, regardless of the border, regardless of the way one loves or the way one goes to bed or wakes up, or even where they do that. Are we not at a place where, and Dr. Pui Lan, you referenced this as well when thinking about this idea of, are we ready? Can we ready ourselves enough to move beyond what we knew to be true yesterday? I want to challenge us all to be courageous, because I believe that what is being called forth now is something that is going to pull us, beckon us, not even pull, but beckon us into a broader degree of freedom that will challenge everything. And when I say everything, I'm saying everything that grounded you even in the past. So some of my new thinking, and definitely each one of the emerging theologians provoked this even more, is so much of what I have stood on in the past has become destabilized. I can no longer hold the same space the way that I used to in order to do the work that is being called forth now. And Dr. Kwok, again, when you were talking about this notion of what it means when we're colonizing everything, right? I don't know that we know how bound we are until we're willing, to be quite honest, to really take a hard look internally, to take ownership for how we have been impacted by empire, impacted by racism, impacted by the ways that we were socialized coming up. And that is not a simple journey. I remember when I had to, when I was consecrated as a bishop in 2008, and was one of the first women bishops in my denomination, the Unity Fellowship Church movement. It provoked one of the most problematic vocational moments in my career, because I didn't know what it meant to be woman bishop. I didn't have that. I didn't have a pathway for that. And so what does it mean when space is provided for us to redefine, for us to expand understandings of? It requires a lot. And my hope is we will be courageous enough to do that personal journey. What I'm putting forth is very personal in nature, because in order to do what Reverend Adira suggested, in order for me to get to be a good part of the we, I have to be a good I. Nia Ubuntu. Because I am, we are, and because we are, I am. But who am I, really? And even in the context, particularly in the context of who I claim to be vocationally, in these religious structures for each one of us, who am I? And then what is possible because of who I am? And so, to your point, lastly, Bishop Tolton, I do agree with you that I think it is an interesting time for us to reimagine even what this experience could be. Like, what does it mean when we no longer allow geography to separate us, ideology to separate us? Like what is it that is possible? And I think a lot is. I will say that there are two things, and I'll be sending you all more information about this. I am working with a group of evangelicals, white evangelicals actually, here in the South, and we are working to establish a kind of experimental way of thinking about theological education called the Black Mountain School of Theology and Community. And the thought is, what does it look like when we view scholars not just as those who come through the academy, but scholars also as those who come through the community? And what is possible when you take scholars from both of those places and purpose in formative ways, to educate them together? To say there is not these distinctions that empire has told us exist to keep us all in our place. One of my former professors, Bishop John Bupalan, did this wonderful body of work around the Dalit culture in India. And he focused on this notion of place and what happens when you move out of place, right? And suggested that actually when Barack Obama became president in the United States, that it had a traumatic impact on America because he moved so far out of place, we didn't know kind of what to do with that. It had a kind of disorienting effect that has ultimately led to a large white backlash, is his theory. But those kind of things are things I think that are possible for us all. Money can be had. I think what is most needed right now is creativity. And my hope is we will begin to think even more together. Thank you to our scholars and theologians. Thank you to each one of you who thought it not robbery to spend your day, this portion of your day with us. I am amazed at what we could accomplish in less than 3 hours. This has just been 3 hours, okay? 3 hours. So can you imagine what can happen if we had a day together? Can you imagine what would happen if we formalize some aspects of this in ways that these conversations can continue on in very intentional ways? Can you imagine what could happen if we find ways that Adira and Kake and Miles can spend time together and imagine together? Can you imagine what is possible if we can all get over ourselves and our fears enough to find our ways to one another through the divine and be okay holding that space as we're able to sit in suffering and joy one with another? I want to thank each one of you. I really encourage you to join us on tomorrow. We have an amazing lineup as well of some of our seasoned theologians, starting off with Reverend Dr. Emily Towns, who will be our keynote speaker tomorrow with an amazing sharing. There will be Q&A opportunities immediately after each one of our theologians share. So that's going to really be a very dynamic time. We get to bring the energy of this experience into tomorrow. And I'm so excited about building upon what has now been established. I want to, from the most heartfelt way, thank my co-hosts for not only today, but also tomorrow, Reverend Dr. Kwok Pui Lan, Bishop Joseph Tolton. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And can we just give them some snaps for the wonderful job that they did with us today? And thank you to each of you. Have an amazing rest of the day. I see several of our speakers from tomorrow is on the line. Dr. Mbotu, Dr. Pearl, Pearl is here. So several of our speakers are here with us, and we're gonna have an amazing time. So we will see you tomorrow. Peace out, and may we all be together as one. God bless.